Hello and welcome to a special presentation from In the Money Media. This is our Pick Six show for Gulfstream Park's Fountain of Youth Day. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Formental, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again. Happy to be joined by two guests who are guys that I always want to talk to before betting Gulfstream Park. We'll get to them in a minute, but want you to know that the show is sponsored by our friends at ExpressBet. ExpressBet, one of the leaders in handicapping contests, and there's a big one this weekend. The Ultimate Betting Challenge is happening. You can play online. You can play at Gulfstream Park. We have no official word on this, but maybe breaking news. Santa Anita did not draw as scheduled for Saturday tonight. That highly suggests that that card may be moved. Nothing official yet. If that happens, if that card's moved by sort of the way the rules are written, the Ultimate Betting Challenge will then be Gulfstream Park only. I don't know. Some California players could be very disappointed by that idea, but I'll tell you what, if you're sort of a Gulfstream centric player, maybe that works to your advantage. Maybe this is an edge you can get in preparing for the UBC. Again, that will be made official later. If they didn't draw today, I don't see how they're running that card as scheduled on Saturday, just using a little bit of common sense. No inside information there. Anyway, Ultimate Betting Challenge. Learn about more on the ExpressBet website, expressbet.com/contest. I think there's even still a qualifier tomorrow. There is a qualifier tomorrow at ExpressBet. If you're listening to this early Friday, late Thursday, if you're one of the many people I see joining us live, hello to the live people. And make sure you get involved. expressbet.com/contest. Incredible day of racing down at Gulfstream Park. We are going to go through this pick six. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer. If you're watching this on the replay, hello to all of you watching on the replay. Leave us your picks in the comments. Tell us what we got right, what we got wrong, and maybe give us your best bet of the day. Always good. We've been doing a lot more interacting with the people in the comments. Now it's time to introduce our panel. If I can figure out how to make the this thing work, and I just did. The man up here on the same level as me, I'm going to move it around just because I like to be. My ego requires me to be front and center. But we'll start with the man in what is my top left corner of the screen. You see him on the Gulfstream Park simulcast feed. He does a phenomenal job knowing the ins and outs of all these Florida horses. He's got the institutional knowledge. I've known him for a minute. We used to work together at a newspaper at Saratoga called the Saratoga Special. He is Brian Nadeau. Brian, how are things?
Hey, Pete, great to have you. Nick, good to see you as well. Things are good. How could they not be, right? South Florida, a monster weekend coming up on Saturday, 14 races. The Fountain of Youth ends the day with a bang, and it's exciting. We've got a heck of a group down here. I know the Risen Star was, the kind of the clubhouse leader for the 3-year-old race so far, but I don't think we're taking a back seat on Saturday. So there's a lot to look forward to, no doubt about it.
It's going to be fun for sure. There are other guests, a man who's been on the airwaves with me a lot. You know him for the fine work he does behind the mic at Sam Houston. You might have seen him doing some tips on social media. You've also read his work over at inthemoneypodcast.com. Another man who I know knows the ins and outs of Florida racing in a way where I can't help but learn something every time I talk to him about Gulfstream or racing in general. He, of course, is Nick Tammaro. Nick, what's up, my man?
I'm doing great, my friend. You're much too kind. I suppose most people would say he knows the outs more than the ins and outs of what goes on. But yeah, I've been known to have a punt or two in South Florida.
Let's start off, boys, with the first race of this pick six. There's actually stakes racing. There's great racing, interesting maidens. Take a look at this whole card. Maybe we'll even put something together, Nick, on the plus side for something earlier on this card because there is so much stuff. That's our bonus service that folks can subscribe to get digests of the picks from all the free shows, as well as some extra content in themoneypodcast.com/plus. We got to do something for this special weekend for that. But Nick, we'll start you off by asking you about this ninth race on the card, the grade 2 Devona Dale for these 3-year-old fillies. Who's your idea of the winner?
Yeah, look, I wish I had something a bit more clever, but obviously the market is going to be dominated by Just FYI and Leslie's Rose. And Just FYI, of course, needs no introduction to just about everyone, having last been seen winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And I thought she really did so impressively. I know the time didn't come back all that great, but, my time as a speed figure maker taught me that you want to be careful with the 2-year-old filly, I should say, going long for the first time, especially overcoming some type of adversity. And she really dealt with a crazy pace in there. I mean, that was a pace that more or less broke Tammaro in half. Jody's Pride came back and ran very well in there, and now is actually slated to run on Saturday as well up in New York. So we'll see how she performs. But I thought Just FYI would probably be a little too much for them when push comes to shove, mainly because she's capable of taking back and sitting off the pace. And there is a lot of committed speed in here. I think there's a pretty decent chance we're going to see this pace heat up. I think Junior has some options as far as the opening furlongs go. I guess my clever idea of a long shot horse would be the 5 Who Could Ask for Mo, but I do fear that this horse is just going to be the really sexy, intriguing off the pace horse in a race where the expectation is a fast early tempo. She's going to be coming from off of it. She's run well if you're a pace figure aficionado against the grain of the race in 3 straight starts. And not so much in her debut, but in two-turn races at Tampa, she's overcome slow paces both times. I mean, she might be sitting back there farther back than she's ever been, but just start licking her chops about the half-mile pole and say, man, they're flying in front of me. So she was sort of my other idea. I'm a little skeptical on Leslie's Rose. I'll tell you this much. If you're a thoroughgraph player, Leslie's Rose is an absolute standout. I mean, she got a 4 and a 5 in her first 2 starts. I should say a 5 and a 4, but also had basically nothing go wrong. Right, she got involved in slow paces both times and parlayed those into pretty solid wins, including a win over Gunsong, who came back impressively. I just think at this point, with the expected forward move with Just FYI, I think she'll be a little too much.
Sounds like 3-5 of the numbers I want to write down for those aforementioned notes from you, Nick. Does that sound about right? Any other?
Yeah, 3-5-2 was my number.
Gotcha. 3, 5, and 2 for Nick, but definitely preference for the top 2. Brian, let's bring you in to get your thoughts on the Devona Dale.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot clever, Pete, and I kind of was with Nick until on Leslie's Rose, and then I thought Leslie's Rose had to work a little too hard to beat Gunsong, and then Gunsong came back and absolutely decimated a field and a nice Chad Brown horse. Like, she is going places. So Nick said it perfectly too. If you are a Sheets guy, I mean, Leslie's Rose, I had a beer bet with somebody. I made Just FYI 7-5 and Leslie's Rose 8-5. Guys, I wouldn't shock me at all if Leslie's Rose is favored in this race. She's fast, and Nick brings up a really valid point about 2-year-old figures and fillies stretching out and stuff. I was kind of taken aback at how quote unquote slow Just FYI is or was. And now, this is not, as we all know, Bill Mott said it himself. Let's get started here. We're aiming for the Kentucky Oaks. We're aiming for the Gulfstream Park Oaks. So if you're going to beat a champion, we all know this is, theoretically the spot to do it. And I think Leslie's Rose, probably needs this race a little more just to prove that she can play with a filly like this. So I have a tepid call to her. I thought the gap was pretty sizable to the rest of them. Into Champagne's good. That would be my one funky kind of clever horse. She's kind of like what Nick mentioned as well with Shug's horse, Who Could Ask for Mo. Into Champagne is another one who should be able to sit back a little bit. She was good winning the Glitter Woman in the slop. She didn't have a clear go of it. She had to wait, and it was once Julien Leparoux got the seam, the race was over. Is she good enough to beat 2 fillies that I think we probably both agree are pretty talented individuals? I don't know, but that would be my, Nick threw out Who Could Ask for Mo. That would be my kind of funky horse, but I don't know if she can beat both of them, and that's she might need both of them to stub their toes a little bit.
Maybe wanted to mix in, though, in the vertical exotics. I hear you, and you never have to twist my arm too hard on a name that I'm pretty sure is a Rupert Holmes hunch play from the classic Escape, the Pina Colada song. I'm assuming that's where it comes from, the classic line, I am into champagne, and he gets very animated. Anyway, I think it's very straightforward. The thing I really like about Just FYI is I totally hear the point on the final figure that Brian was making. But when a horse who's a closer in theory has enough early gas to make the top, at least according to the Timeform US algorithm, I see a perfect trip unfolding, and I'm going to be very uncreative here. And if you get 7-5, 8-5, I would be comfortable wading in the waters with Just FYI. Devona Dale. Let's move it along to the 10th race on the program. and we'll get some more thoughts on this loaded card in the form of, and let me ask you, Brian, if they make you say on TV, if you call this race the very one or the very one, because my understanding of grammar, it should be the very one. Grade 3 action for these fillies and mares going a mile and 3/8 on the turf. But start off with how you're going to pronounce this, how you're going to say the name of this race on TV, and then give us your thoughts.
I never thought about it, to be honest with you, but I'm pretty sure I'm just going to say the very one. But I guess on a technicality, you are right. The very one. I don't know. Now I'm going to be all distraught. I don't know.
Who wins the thing?
Boy, that's a good question. I think the tactical speed of Sister Luann's got to play in here. You look at some of these horses, Cairo Concert, our Cali Kim's somewhat tactical, but this turf course weather looks great, by the way, guys. That's pretty cool. This turf course, we all know it. I don't have to tell you or the guests or the people watching. It's going to play to speed, and Sister Luann's got the tactical speed to get first run on a bunch of these gals, and I'm not quite so sure. We haven't seen the best of her yet, so she's a tepid nod. But I do kind of feel like, since we're pick sixing and exoticing here, this seems a little spready to me. Cairo Consort's the question horse, because I'm not so sure she's improved from 3 to 4. She might be one of those fillies that never really bridges the gap from 2 to 3 to 3 to 4, let alone. I know she kind of has a big figure out of the Pegasus. She didn't do any running in that race whatsoever. I mean, you look at the running line of a Sister Luann, who, if nothing else, was at least up there chasing a pace that held together pretty nicely. So I'm much more tilted towards Cairo Consort. And I think our Cali Kim, I don't want to say she got exposed last time. I don't think she might have had a trip that some people will think. I thought she had the length of the stretch to come through and didn't want to do it. Now she cuts back. So I like Sister Luann in this spot.
That would be my pick as well. What did you end up making Sister Luann on the morning line, Brian? They're not quite in yet. That damn side pedigree and that pace advantage made me want to go that way. What price do you think we're getting?
Yeah, I got her at 5 to 2 and Cairo at 3. I know Cairo Consort's Todd and Irad, but Sister Luann, Safi, and Ken Ramsey, and Ken might bet $30,000 on her himself. So I don't know. So it was kind of tough. I actually went back and looked at it before we came on. I had initially had Cairo Consort favored, and I swapped them. I know they were both big numbers in the Pegasus, and Sister Luann was a really big one, but that's where I tilted.
5, 7, and 10. Is that how you am I summing that up correctly?
Yeah, nothing too clever. I want to say, before I just throw it to Nick, I think the 9 Angel Nadashiko is interesting. First time Safi on the turf off a slow win at Santa Anita, but he's had her for a bit now, and it's got something to work with here. She's got some speed.
We'll throw her in the mix as well. My question about Cairo Consort was about the distance as much as anything else. Nick, what do you think about her specifically, her ability to go this far, and what are your general thoughts on this? Now, I don't know whether to call it the very one or the very one either, but I'll go with my first gut on the very one.
Yeah, the very one would be mine as well. So there, there's a couple of horses in here, one of whom I've sort of always been against, and now I'm warming up to, which means it's probably doomsday for her, and that's our Cali Kim, who I've been against in pretty much every recent start, including the second place finish in the La Provence. I didn't get her at all in the Long Island. I think I made her way too big a price on the morning line at Keeneland in October, which of course most people would say that's nothing new. So and she was victorious. It's at almost just over 7 to 5. I think she is the fit. I think what you're getting with her is the certainty that the distance is really right up her alley, whereas everybody else is a question mark at 11 plus furlongs. And so I don't want to gamble on Cairo Consort at a small price. I don't also want to assume that Sister Luann is going to go this far and take, and I think Brian priced them exactly right. I just don't want to bet on that. I'd rather bet on our Cali Kim at a bit better price. I did think that she ran effectively last time out, being much closer to the pace, which I thought was an important factor as well. I also thought Miss Yearwood was dangerous in here, and I think her form might be the sufficiently dirtied up with the bad Via Borghese, and that was on the synthetic, so I don't want to hold it against her at all. I picked this race 10-8-5. I would be against Cairo Consort. Nothing about her really screams to me, oh, this filly's going to get significantly better at a longer distance, and you're just going to have to swallow too short a price for my liking.
It's a fair point about our Callie Kim and the distance. I was just wondering if the pace is what gave me confidence that, the pace on the dam side was what made me think Sister Luann would be okay going this far. But at the prices, I don't blame you at all for trying to maybe get a little bit cute with the likes of mixing Miss Yearwood in there as well. Race 11 is the Gulfstream Park Mile. Grade 2 action going a mile on the dirt. And a bunch of familiar names turning up in this spot, including the winner on Pegasus Day, making the return to the races. Tumbarumba, not Chumbawamba, as I had to explain to somebody. Tumbarumba. Nick, who gets the money in the Gulfstream Park Mile?
Yeah, you want to talk about pace. I mean, there is no pace in here whatsoever. And that's going to be a huge factor. I mean, that's going to be the determining factor, in my opinion, when push comes to shove. And I think Tumbarumba is in a really advantageous position, being that he's comfortable being forwardly placed. And he was sort of the last man standing in the Fred Hooper last time out and still got the job done in really what was a big time performance. So I envision him being tough to beat in here. I picked him. I didn't have any reason to have any qualms about picking him. I did think Castle Chaos, who he beat last time out, could come back and be very dangerous as well. He doesn't have to be that far off of it. The rail was not really the greatest result for him because, generally at Gulfstream, you want to work your way off the inside. But if we're getting towards this pick 6 sequence and you have reason to believe that there's no disadvantage whatsoever to being inside, then I think you might want to treat him as a pretty prominent player. And my other horse that I would include in more on the bottom end of some of the exotics is Il Miracolo, who I feel like is finally getting kind of he's like an A dog down to B, so to speak. And to go back to greyhound terms, he's been running against top-notch horses and admittedly meets a significantly weaker field. I mean, this is a horse that has been running in nothing but grade 1 and grade 2 races, and legitimate grade 1 and grade 2 races going all the way back to last summer. So I could see him running a better race. I didn't really think he got the best go of it last out in the Pegasus, being a little too close to a really hot pace. So 5-1-4 for me. I would definitely bump up the 5 a couple times extra.
I will just chime in with my thoughts here because they're so darn similar. I thought
Pete, let me cut you off one quick second. Then
please.
Castle Chaos, 99% going up to New York. So
okay, cross-entered and potentially traveling. Well, that would leave our numbers exactly the same then, Nick. I'll put a little asterisk in the notes because I thought that this could be a 2-speed number, 5 and 4. I put the 4 Il Miracolo on top, thinking maybe with the inside draw and a clever ride could get out of there and get into the right spot. But yeah, Tumbarumba super sharp right back. Coming out of that common race was another one I wanted on my tickets. How about you, Brian? Can we bring in some new numbers here? I got Nick having it 5-1-4, but probably 5-4 in the end, and then me 4-5. Where do you sit?
Yeah, it's really tough to disagree or go against anything Nick said because I think probably Tumbarumba is the best horse, and he also Nick painted it perfectly. He's the best horse with the best scenario in the race. I mean, if Louis wants to go, he can set the pace. If somebody, Ticking wants to run off again, then he'll just sit right off him. He's going to get first run, and then conversely, not only does he have an edge, but a horse like Steel Sunshine, I like a lot, but he just always runs out of room. He can't get there. How does it hit Il Miracolo, on the cutback from a lot of 9 furlong races? It's going to be sharp for him as well. And I can't believe Witt is still – somehow Witt's only run 13 times and he's only 5 years old. But this is just a get-going point for him, right? And he turned kind of sort of into a turf horse last year. So it's just tough. We're all like to try to beat favorites and all that kind of good stuff. I don't really think this is a spot to try to do it. So 8-5 on Tumbarumba, and that's I don't know, maybe it's the free square. That's a little bold, but maybe this is a race where you can be tight and try to get some chaos, maybe before, maybe after.
I hear it. Do you want to name check any other numbers beyond the 5 Tumbarumba, or is this really a lone A type situation? And
I'll have a B on Steel Sunshine because I do respect him in the late run, and maybe the lack of pace maybe allows him to be a little closer, because he absolutely got blitzed last time. And I do think I agree with what Nick said here. Miracolo is Miracle or whatever. He's interesting. He finally does get some class relief, and he keeps on keeping on. So maybe he's got one of these in his future as well. But I don't think they're A's, Pete. That's for sure.
Good thoughts there. We move on to race number 12, the Grade 3 Canadian, going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf this time around. Brian, we'll keep it with you.
Well, this is my one like super clever thing here. Boy, there's no speed in this race, is there? Right? And I don't know if Saratoga Flash is any good. The only number he's got was at Kentucky Downs, and I don't even know if that counts really. But boy, he's got to go from down there, and I think he can control the pace. I don't really see. Might catch some horses like an Emmanuel at the right time. There's some closers in here. I'm going to just take a deep breath and hope he guts it out. At what should be a pretty darn inviting price as well. Got to respect Emmanuel, but does he need the race? Last year, he came into this race, which he won with a prep behind him. So could he be a little short today? Atone ran absolutely, nobody's talked about it. Atone ran huge in the Pegasus. I have no idea how or why. He looked absolutely dreadful in the optional claimer prior to it, but we know he likes it here. The one horse that I'm not going to pick, because I am going to pick Saratoga Flash. Doesn't Turf King for Chad just look a little sneaky in here? Chad ran second in the Pegasus with Turf with I'm Very Busy, who I'm not going to say they're the same horse, but they were kind of on paper slow. What are you doing in here? You're overmatched. And you give Chad a spot, and this horse hasn't run since July. Maybe we get a bigger, stronger, tougher version of Turf King. I'm going to have him as an A for sure. This is a race where I think we probably all agree we can get a little off the wall here, maybe.
1 and 4 on the A line, 3 and 6 on the B line. Does that represent?
Yeah, and I do respect. I don't. The flow of the race isn't ideal. I like CJ Boston as well, but not as an A.
Gotcha. We'll throw that one in on the backup line. Nick, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do get the temptation with Saratoga Flash for sure, because it does look like he can be in a really advantageous spot pace-wise. I mean, Emmanuel is versatile enough to be forward, I think, so he doesn't have to give up terribly much ground. Same with Smoke and Tea. The good thing about Smoke and Tea is it feels like he's been able to be positioned just about anywhere by Johnny, and I do think, that sort of ideal Johnny V first over stalking trip is a real possibility. So I think he's got that, that club in his bag, so to speak. I did think there were some interesting off the pace horses. I do fear that they might be up against it a little bit in terms of race flow. Siege of Boston was kind of the biggest one to me. I thought his Tampa Bay was probably a better race than it looks on paper. And we've seen Running B and Never Explained both show glimpses of being really solid horses. He's now second off the layoff. He's run effectively on multiple occasions, around 2 turns without Lasix, et cetera, et cetera. So I think he sort of checks every box in that respect. And I think he'll end up getting the right kind of trip as long as there's a little bit of pace in front of him. But I mean, again, the fear, of course, as Brian alluded to, is that Saratoga Flash is loose. I guess in sort of a crazy way, Giant Game kind of holds the key to this race, because he really is the horse that you could see putting the most pressure on Saratoga Flash early, and that could really set things up for somebody to come from a little bit off of it. So I'm gonna probably pick Smoke and Tea. I would say that my numbers are going to include some combination of 2, 3, and 5 on the top line. I don't want to be totally against Atone. I think he had enough trouble in the Pegasus to be given some consideration, and maybe he's just kind of a South Florida wonderkin. I can't explain why he didn't run well on numerous occasions last year, but really has now put forth his best efforts in South Florida for a couple of years.
He was the one I picked, and it's almost like just a trainer play at this point, honestly, when you see, the maker success in turf really everywhere, and this horse's affinity for Florida as well. I had the 6 on top, the 3 as an A, 2 likely to ignore. Saratoga Flash I had in the mix as the pace play, and I think the case on Smoke and Tea is a strong one, and this horse could really trip out under Johnny in this spot. And this is another situation where I feel like in this meet in the last few years we've seen the McGahee runners overperform. So very spready for me. 6 and 3 on the A line, 1 and 2 on the B line. Nick, I wrote you down just 2, 3, 5 as A's. Do you want to throw in some B's?
6.
throw that 6 in as a B for the maker factor there as we finish our chat about the Canadian. And we go on to race 13, which is the Honey Fox Fillies and Mares, 4 and up, a mile on the turf. And this was a race I thought had an abundance of pace, and I was eyeing a closer. Do you think I have that general idea right, Nick? And who is going to get the money?
I agree. I do think you want somebody from off the pace here. This was my kind of clever horse for the sequence. I'm going to pick the 8 Mohawk Trail for Kelsey Danner, who I think needs to quicken up a little bit, needs to develop a bit from 3 to 4, but at the same time showed some ability last year, albeit against weaker horses on a number of occasions. But when we last saw her, she had a wide trip going 6.5 at Kentucky Downs, which really isn't her ideal distance. I think she wants to go a little bit farther. I do think she might prefer a 1-turn configuration, but the 2 turns might not be too much for her to overcome. And she's going to be a decent enough price for me to take that plunge. So I picked her on top. I think the logicals in here are Chili Flag and Walkathon. I strongly prefer Chili Flag, though, of the 2. Just because I think Walkathon is a little dressed up off a very soft trip at Tampa last time out. The thing that I keep coming back to, though, with Walkathon is that early in her career, she really hinted at having some serious ability. And the fact that she's now looking like she's maybe putting it together is something of significance. So I want to give her an opportunity to just maybe be that good horse that we always kind of thought she might be. And so I included her. Chili Flag, I thought, ran very well in the Pegasus Philly turf, even though the running line, I thought her performance, or the running line belies her performance in that, there wasn't a lot of ground made up in there other than surprisingly. So I kind of wanted to give Chili Flag another opportunity. She seems like kind of a deserving favorite.
We're becoming a little redundant on this show, Nick, and I'll chime in again. Chili Flag, I did think looked the best on Figures and Form, and maybe projected to get the best trip as well, taking advantage of that speed. But I also saw the case for Mohawk Trail and had some number 8s in there. A horse I thought was decidedly against the flow when last seen at Kentucky Downs, and I like the way David Egan's been riding. And I think he'll suit her well. Very curious, Brian, to get your not just your thoughts on the race, but also curious what you did with the morning line in terms of Chili Flag and Mohawk Trail.
Yeah, I had Chili Flag at 9 to 5. I feel like when you look at this race, there's maybe some horses that are going to get bet, but they're going to hammer Chili Flag. You see the Pegasus, it's Chad, it's Irad, Mike Dubb, and all that stuff. So she's 9 to 5. I think I have Mohawk at 20. I mean, these aren't final, and I have a hell of a lot of respect for Nick's opinion. I think he did say it. She looks a little slow, but that was at 3, and she's a lot more mature now. I want to pick up on what Nick said with Walkathon, because boy, didn't she really get a soft trip at Tampa. So I was a little against her. Be My Sunshine did check late. She was certainly never going to win the race, but she's Safi and Ken Ramsey, and she's 3 for 4 here. I didn't have anything clever in this race. The one horse I do want to throw out, I thought Candy Light was a little interesting because Safi got her last time from Grand Motion off the layoff, and she perked up, winning, albeit on the Tapeta. She's got some pretty okay turf races. Second off the layoff, second time with Safi. She certainly looked like she's working up a storm. And she's another one of those horses, as you guys alluded to, and I agree with, the profile of this race is a little off the pace. So I was looking for some horses, I'm not saying it's going to melt down, but I think we all agree that we want some horses that are going to have the ability to come from off of it a little bit. And I think that could, make Candy Light from a nice post as well, at least, at a square number in here. I think she's interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So if I were to ask you to give your formal picks, Brian, how are you leaning?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to beat Chili Flag. Right now I'm 6-2-3, 5. I thought Ancient Peace was interesting too. The post is just so problematic to be way out there. When you go a mile on this turf course and you're out there, it's a real difficult assignment.
Maybe one to mention as like a deeper backup, or did you ultimately decide against? Okay,
no, I'm going to use her on a fringe ticket because, like I said, I do think the beauty of this sequence, we all kind of thought Tumbarumba could maybe be a single, then you can get to horses like that, and I think that's the good part of it.
Absolutely. Ticket construction, so much the key. And of course, just because we're talking about this pick six sequence, we fully encourage folks, especially depending on what your budgetary limits are, and your risk tolerance, nothing wrong with focusing in on a double within the sequence, or even the old pick one. Just find the winner with some of these horses we're talking about that might be interesting prices, as opposed to putting it all on in the more lottery style of a bet like the pick six. Let's go to the race that gives the day its name, the Fountain of Youth. And the first question we have to ask ourselves is, who's going to turn up here? Because Speak Easy cross-entered in an allowance race on Friday, and just a huge factor in the race, not just because on figures and the talent flash would be a contender, I would have to say at the very least, if he turns up here, but also as he affects the pace. So, Brian, we're going to let you do this race first, but give us your educated guess first and foremost. Will we see Speak Easy in the Fountain of Youth?
You know what? It's as we do this, obviously live on Wednesday night, I have no idea, to be quite honest with you. To me, if you just handicap that part of it, I kind of feel like he will run, because then if he doesn't run, then all your chips are in whatever final prep race, and we'd love to hope it's the Florida Derby, but whatever final prep race Todd Pletcher chooses, he darn well better at least run second. So I kind of feel like he's going to show up on Saturday, and boy, I'll tell you what, if he does, then the entire complexion of the race, let's just assume he's in this race, boy, it looks hellacious up front, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. There would be pace pressure, though I would think he'd prove the best of speed. I guess I'll ask it both ways. Who's your pick if he's in the race? Who's your pick if he's not in the race?
If he's not in the race, I can't believe it, but I think I'm going to pick Victory Avenue. You guys, we have to remember, everybody, that you guys know this, and most people do. This is short stretch finish line race, guys. This is not this is closer to a sprint almost, for my money. And I people who watch me, I say it all the time. You get to that far turn, the finish line's right in front of you. And if Speak Easy's out of this race, Victory Avenue is going to be hell to pay in here, because he is so fast. I don't want to say I don't buy that race with Speak Easy and Victory Avenue, but what I want to say is that was race 2 on the Pegasus card. The next dirt race did not occur until race 9. So that race is way out there on an island, but I think we all agree that Victory Avenue is very, very fast. And if Speak Easy's out, then he's trouble. But I do think if they're both in, I kind of feel like Dornock's going to be tough in here.
Dornock, certainly one of the main contenders, a horse that was very impressive in re-rallying in the Rems in a race whose form has been franked so far. Most recently by Sierra Leone the other week, though and I know people disagree about this, but I felt like Dornock, and this is my only, not to make any attempt to talk you off, Brian, but I did think maybe that was a little bit better and more game than it looked, in that I think he might have been where you wanted to be on that track, and it might have carried him home a little bit. So I'll ask you. We'll do an extra round on this race. I'll ask you guys some more questions as we go through. But Nick, we'll start with you with the big question of Speak Easy's participation. Do you see it? Do you not see it? And who's your pick in the race in each scenario, if he's in or if he's out?
Yeah, I mean, I have no line on where Todd's going to go. Obviously, as Brian alluded to, he's putting a pretty massive premium on Speak Easy's ability to win a final prep in order to get to the Derby, because he's going to need to be presumably at least second in one in order to get there. So he is putting himself in a bit of a risky position. Todd's done this before. He did something similar with Always Dreaming 7 years ago and ran him in an allowance race before he tried him in the Florida Derby. It does seem like the contingent of horses in South Florida this year are better. Todd also specifically could potentially have 2 marquee Derby horses in South Florida headed towards the final round of preps. I wouldn't pick him either. I mean, obviously I'm not going to pick him if he's not in the race, but I wouldn't pick him if he was. I'm unlocked here either way. I still have a lot of respect for Locked, and I'm very intrigued to see if he's going to take a step forward in here, and and what he might have to offer in looking at this race and in starting to handicap it. I not only realized, and I tweeted this the other night, that Locked was favored in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which I did not realize. I was sitting there and just assumed that Prince of Monaco or somebody else was favored, but it was Locked. He actually ran a lot better than I thought. There was no setup whatsoever. He really came with a strong late bid. He's got a little bit of that Fletcher profile to him, right? I mean, he wants to sort of get outside and make his final bid. He doesn't really seem to want things to go against him in a way. I did think he was more mature in there than he was in the Breeders' Futurity. I thought he took a clear step forward. I don't love that his training was interrupted for this race, and I do fear a little bit that maybe we could be dealing with some adversity there. But, in Todd, I trust in that respect. If he's in the gate, I would imagine he's going to be ready to fire a very big shot. And it's, it becomes an intriguing matchup. Obviously, if Speakeasy's in there, it feels like that has to help Locked.
No doubt about it. Pace, the way I'd put it is, if Speakeasy's in the race, I love Locked. If Speakeasy isn't in the race, I like Locked. And you could take it, and we talked about this off air, Nick, that maybe it's a vote of no confidence in a way in Locked if Speakeasy's in there. Then the other way of looking at it is they're both gonna be in South Florida. Like they both need points. So even if they run 1-2, like maybe it's not as much. Maybe we're getting to a point where there's few enough prep races left where you could say, well, they're each running, so we can sort of figure out exactly where he is with them, and maybe it's not so bad. I don't know. I throw up my hands. At the end of the day, I'm going to pick Lock. I think you made a key point, Nick, that's been sort of a little bit underrated in terms of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I'm not saying there was some massive bias on Breeders' Cup Friday because there weren't that many dirt races. It's kind of hard to tell. But it was interesting, like Racing Flow had it very notable that not as much, the way I'll put it is that not as much closing happened as you would have expected. I think especially in the Juvenile itself, you can make a case that Locke was against the flow, and I've seen people dismiss him as, oh, he was this well-beaten third. Well, if Fierceness was totally with the flow and he was totally against the flow, like the distance between them probably isn't as great as that. I know, Fierceness unfortunately threw up on himself in his return to the races, but we all agree that was a fast race whose form has been franked by others in this race. I think Locke deserves his position on the top 10 right now that we have him on the Eric DeCoster top 10 over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com, and I think he'll justify that position on Saturday. I'm with him. Let's go for another round of questions in this race and talk about maybe either an angle to bet it or an interesting horse to mix in there or take as a potential alternative should there be some sort of boil over. I mean, Victory Avenue, I think, qualifies for that Brian already threw out that. But I'll start with you, Nick. If this horse gets turned over, well, let's put it this way. Who's the interesting long shot to either potentially turn over Locked if he doesn't fire or maybe to put in underneath? And that could be two different horses, depending on your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you're inclined to say maybe the interesting underneath horse is Real Macho, who was up in time to win an allowance race last out. I don't really love this barn in a Lasix off situation, but I do think this horse kind of has the right profile for this type of race. It looks like they're going to go quick in front of him. Dancing Groom is another who I could see maybe clunking up for third. These are horses that, that kind of have a chance in an extreme pace scenario. It would be almost unfathomable to think that a trifecta combo could have Locked on top and one of those two rather underneath him, maybe third. That's going to be a nearly total collapse race. That's going to require Speakeasy being in it. They felt like maybe the horses that could slide in for a little bit underneath. I think from a betting perspective, you're probably trying, if you have a negative opinion, if you have Brian's opinion, you're probably trying to beat Locked in the exacta. And if you have my opinion, you're probably trying to beat Dornock. So Dornock is a he wins, I lose horse in this race. I just, as a rule, and I hate applying steadfast rules to handicapping. It's a quick way to lose money. But I can't bet horses off of gold rail trips like his last time, even as much as it looked like he maybe came back along the inside. I think he was significantly aided by a very strong track profile in there. And quite honestly, I think the horse that makes the Remsen a little bit of an eyebrow raise is Domestic Product, because Domestic Product came back and ran significantly better in the Holy Bull, where he had an inside trip again, but he had an inside trip in the Remsen and didn't run well at all. The fact that Drumroll Please and Sierra Leone ran well is no surprise. Drumroll Please took the worst of it from a track profile perspective. He was wide the entire way. Sierra Leone was inside, angled out, produced a big run, and then ultimately, kind of got a little goofy late and pulled himself up, maybe hung, and Dornock was able to come back. I'll be perfectly honest. I also don't trust Danny Gargan with a horse that needs to move forward from year to year. I mean, we saw this last year with WHNL. I think Dornoch is definitely a better horse. He's a more seasoned horse, but I'm just going to make him prove it to me. And I think you can take a stand with horses like that at 2-1 or 5-2 that you wouldn't want to if they were going to be 6 or 8-1 and offer real value.
You always give extra credit to people who've done it before. I mean, it's no knock on Danny Gargan. It's just it's easier to trust it when you've seen it year in, year out, and that's maybe a positive too for the forerunner you mentioned, Victory Avenue. I mean, there was so much hype on this. I said forerunner, it's a 3-runner, isn't it? Yeah, 3-runner Victory Avenue, who there was so much hype on ahead of that debut, and we saw Gustavo Delgado use this race last year as a jumping off point, or that race, I should say, as a jumping off point to Derby success. Brian, you've already mentioned an interesting long shot angle in terms of Victory Avenue. What are you thinking in terms of actually betting this race? Are there any other horses you might want to name check as potential underneath uses, or another long shot you might consider?
It wouldn't shock me if Victory Avenue's favored in this race, the way they bet this barn and the way they bet this horse. What I'm going to do is I can't give you a long shot. I think that would be pretty implausible. Born Noble ran so much better than Real Macho in the allowance race. But Real Macho is a horse that could run on a little bit late. But what I'm just going to try to do is, and again, it's all contingent on who's in and who's not. I'm going to try to break up the Dornoch locked exacta. And, Nick's going to try to do that as well the other way, because a lot of people are going to one punch that. And I'm a little against Lock. I'm a little against his running style in this particular race. I wouldn't fight anybody that thinks Locked is probably at the end of the day the best horse. And I know he won at Keeneland on a short stretch finish line kind of race. But I think today, Nick mentioned he missed a little time, not a lot. He's got a couple works back to back, and all reports are he worked really well. But again, we're talking about starting off points. So I'm probably, if I had a bet for you, I'd probably go 5-3 and then heavier and a little 3-5. If Speakeasy comes out, I don't know if they're going to catch Victory Avenue. So that, again, it's all contingent on about noon on Friday. We're going to know front and center.
Yeah, well, that will be helpful. I do think the 2 long shots that Nick mentioned as closers were horses, and that's Real Macho and Dancing Groom, the 4 and the 9. Were very, with Speakeasy in the race, I think they're very interesting. Yeah. To get little pieces. I think you're right. Getting the 3 closer thing maybe is hard, Nick, but I'd want a little money. I'd want some money going in that direction. But I also might at that point look for other logical horses. I might have some Victory Avenue and Dornoch small, even though I don't love them, over those the 4 and the 9 if they're huge prices and if that pace shapes up. But most of the money for me will be running through Locked, and I'll be right or I won't be, and we'll figure it out and pick up the pieces from there. We got a lot of content going on In the Money Media right now. We are going to have another live stream with Jeff Chapman and Duke Matisse about Santa Anita. JK and I are going to be previewing the Preakness Future Wager. Stephen Chris will be around on the audio side of things to give his thoughts on Gotham Day. You can also read Nick's Gotham Day analysis over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com. I'll tell you what, the easiest way to keep track of all the content, whether it's on the website or on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts in the Money Media, is to sign up for our free newsletter, InTheMoneyPodcast.com/email. That will give you a digest every week of everything going on. Gentlemen, really appreciate your time this evening. Brian, we will see you on TV. Nick, we will see you on the radio or behind the microphone. Really appreciate both of your time today. Thank you, boys.
Yeah, guys, always good to catch up. Nick, good to see you. Pete, good to talk. And let's do it again soon.
Great seeing you, my friend. Yep, best of luck.
All right, this show's been a production of In the Money Media. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.